Coming up on Network Africa, more than 40 dead in new Democratic Republic of Congo attack attributed to ADF. United Nations Security Council extends sanctions against Sudan for another year. Plus, Tunisia's leader, President Kais Saied, to dissolve elected local councils. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawadu. We begin with the devastating effects of war in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where at least 36 villagers have been killed in renewed attacks by a rebel group. And that's according to the governor of North Kivu province in the east of the country. Carly Nzanzu Kasivita posted on social media that the village of Mukundi has been burned to the ground by the ADF, which allies itself with Islamists but seems more intent on exploiting the region's mineral riches. He has called for more troops to be deployed to neighboring villages south of the city of Beni to prevent further attacks. And we have now Chidi Nwanu, who's a security expert, calling us from London to tell us more about the security situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Nwanu, for joining us on Network Africa.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right. So what can you tell us about the ADF?
Well, the ADF is essentially considered to be an offshoot of the Islamic State in Central Africa, in Uganda, and it was formed roughly around 1995 with several rebel groups joining together. It's ostensibly led by what is called a revert, a Christian who converted to Islam, and essentially, much like many of the insurgent groups in DRC, Uganda, it's gravitated from, an anti-government stance to what, we would define as warlordism, essentially just taking over territory in order to exploit its territory. In order to exploit its resources. It makes a large use of child soldiers. And there's a suspicion that is being backed by foreign powers. Alternatively, it's being muted that it's being backed by Rwanda. Sometimes it's Uganda is mentioned. It's just another part of this crazy proxy war that's taking place in DRC, and it's unfortunate that now with the metastasization and its links to the Islamic State group, it's looking like the attacks will increase not just in intensity but in its brutality.
And according to the report, these rebels are even more interested in the precious minerals of the land. Would you say that those trying to broker peace have not even considered the enormity of this problem?
Well, yes, and this is the original sin of Congo, and I mean literally the original sin of Congo. And it was from the beginning, it was always treated as just a place to exploit its resources. And now, and it has evolved, under both the colonialists, African rulers, and the different proxy armies. It's always been about exploiting its resources. So, serious questions need to be asked about how these minerals are making their way into the world market. From coltan to platinum to all the other, all the other minerals that are extracted out of Congo. A serious attempt to kind of clean up the extractive industry in Congo would go a long way to reducing the incentives for these rebel groups to exist. Something like the Kimberley process for extractive minerals in Congo would reduce their funding, or at least make it much more difficult for them to be able to extract their resources.
Well, at the moment, there is no peace in that region. Does this strike you as insincerity on the part of some parties?
Well, definitely. I mean, Rwanda, again, is a classic example. Rwanda is well known to be party to this conflict through it previously directly, but now through its proxies. And Rwanda is fated by most of the world for for its developmental success and for its recovery from its genocide and for its very genuine kind of good governance, but its actions across Central Africa are malign. And without Rwanda in particular being called to order, this problem is just going to continue.
Well, what would you now recommend going forward from where they are at the moment? What do you think should be done from now?
Well, it's always a poison chalice trying to make recommendations, in geopolitics or foreign affairs. But I mean, the key thing, as I said, is follow the money, targeting those minerals that are being extracted. And the problem is everybody benefits from this: the Congolese government, the Congolese military, the groups, the armed groups, the countries surrounding it, companies in the Far East, companies in the West. Everybody benefits from extracting these minerals. So a concerted effort, possibly by the AU and the UN, to clamp down on the extracted resources from Congo and make sure that everything that comes out of the Congo comes through a verified source. That will really make the ADF and other groups struggle. They'll have to smuggle their goods out, and also a regional force, much like the Kenyans are leading, that will enforce peace in the region.
Thank you very much, security expert Chidi Nwanu. Thanks for your time, as always, and your perspective on the matter.
Thanks for your time.
To more stories now, more than 20,000 people have been displaced in North Kivu in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo amid recent clashes between the Congolese army and the M23 armed group. According to a UN spokesperson, Farhan Haq, residents in the Kibiziri area, which is about 120 kilometers from Goma, were forced to flee due to fighting in surrounding villages.
Displaced in North Kivu. More than 20,000 people have been displaced in North Kivu, in the east of the country, amid recent clashes between the Congolese army and the M23 armed group. Residents in the Kibirizi area, which is about 120 kilometers from Goma, were forced to flee due to fighting in surrounding villages. Over the past year, more than 800,000 people have been affected by renewed fighting between Congolese forces and the M23, according to authorities and our humanitarian colleagues. We call on all parties to the conflict to respect international humanitarian law, protect the civilian population, and secure access to populations in need of humanitarian assistance. And I can say
the UN Security Council has extended sanctions and an arms embargo against Sudan by 1 year. The 15-member council voted to renew the mandate of the panel of experts charged with monitoring and implementing the sanctions and embargo until 12th March next year. 13 countries voted in favor of the motion, while Russia and China abstained. China's representative Dai Bing said the sanctions were outdated and should be lifted because things had improved on the ground. Russia's Dmitry Poliske also said that the sanctioned regime does not reflect the situation of Darfur, and it is now preventing the Sudanese government from state building and achieving socio-economic development. Sudan has been in economic and political turmoil since 2021, when the General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan-led junta overthrew and then took over power from a civilian-led transitional government. South Sudanese President Salva Kiir has sacked his foreign minister less than 1 week after dismissing the defense and interior ministers. No explanation was given for that dismissal of Mayik Aideng, which was announced on a decree on state television. The sacked minister is an ally of Mr. Kiir and previously served as the minister in the president's office. Just last week's sackings have threatened to derail a peace deal with opposition leader's first vice president, Riek Machar. The opposition called for the reinstatement of Angelina Teny, who was dismissed. Mr. Kiir dismissed her and handed the position to his own party. Mrs. Teny is also Mr. Machar's wife. The United Nations called for parties to exercise restraint and even engage in collegial spirits in order to resolve such sensitive national issue. Tunisia's President, Mr. Said also has announced that municipal councils elected in 2018 are to be dissolved and replaced by what he calls special delegation. The council were seen as one of the democratic gains achieved in Tunisia after the uprising in 2011 that overthrew the autocratic regime of Zain Ben Ali. The councils were dominated by what is now the main opposition parties to Mr. Said, who is increasingly imposing what the critics say is a one-man rule. He announced that new councils will also be elected, but under his new rules. Members of a South African Health Workers Union have continued to a fourth day of protest outside government-owned health institutions over a wage hike, and that's the dispute. The union wants 10%, while government is offering just 4.5%. This has seen health services disrupted and even patients turned back at some health facilities there. According to the health minister, Dr. Joe Falia, who visited some of the hospitals to help restore calm, 4 people have lost their lives as a result of the strike so far.
This is what the main entrance of the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital has been looking like in the past 4 days. Rocks and bins and other forms of barricades. Same scenario at the Helen Joseph Hospital, also in Johannesburg, and many other government-owned health facilities across the country.
It is not like we're neglecting the work that they're giving us, but at some point they have to listen to us. When we engage to them, they must think for us. We've got families, we've got everything that we have to look for. The only thing that we're asking is that 10%. Please, that's our plea and plea.
Since the beginning of the strike on Monday, patients have been turned back by the protesters, while nurses and doctors who are not part of the strike have also been denied access to healthcare facilities. For a second day, Health Minister Dr. Joe Patla has visited a number of hospitals to assess the situation and brief the media this Thursday. The Chief Executive Officer of the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital, Gladys Bohoshi, here paints the picture of the challenges they're facing owing to the strike.
Then I will move to maternity. We had mothers who had to deliver. Unfortunately, as it was said, when you work in theatre, you do not need a nurse and a doctor only. You need the operators who must wash the instruments and all other things, the porters to move the patients. I must say that our clinical team who managed to come in became cleaners, they became everything to ensure that at least the emergencies that were there, the mothers who had to deliver managed to deliver through that.
This morning, preliminarily, I'm afraid to go into a lot of detail. There was an indication that up to a number of 4 people, are likely to have lost their lives in a manner which can be attributed directly to the strike.
The protests, which are happening nationwide, have recorded some violence and destruction in some places. The protesting workers even clashed with the police as they dispersed the crowd at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto, Johannesburg. The Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Patla, says in Gauteng, police had no choice but to use rubber bullets to disperse members of Nehawu.
Those who can be identified in one way or another as having participated in the violence, in the disruption, physical and so on, of disruption, they will face, on the one side, we explore with our legal team criminal charges, but also definitely disciplinary charges.
We spoke to the regional chairman of Nehawu in Gauteng, and he says rumors about them being violent are untrue.
Whatever they're trying to do is to demobilize us from where we are. How can we kill a patient if we are demonstrating peacefully outside? It can't be. They will always come up with police tactics as much as they are using now and using. In some institutions, you'll find the very same securities are pushing us backwards, rubber bullet. What for? It can't be that.
Nehawu insists that they will continue their protests until their demands of a 10% wage increase is implemented. While government is offering a 4.5% increase, Health Minister Dr. Joe Patla insists that the no work, no pay policy will also be implemented.
Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. A human rights organization, Africa for Palestine, has welcomed a historic motion adopted with an overwhelming majority by the Parliament of South Africa to support the downgrade of South Africa's embassy in Israel to the liaison office. The parliamentary motion, introduced by the National Freedom Party, passed 208 for and 94 against. Parties that voted in favor of the historic motion include, among others, the African National Congress, the ANC, Economic Freedom Front, EFF, African Independence Congress, AIC, and Pan-African Congress, PAC. Parties that voted against the Palestinian resolution include the Democratic Alliance and the ACDP. The NFP parliamentary leader, Honorable Sheikh Emam, explains that the downgrade of the South African embassy in Israel to the liaison office should, quote, serve as a catalyst to start the process of progressively and completely isolating apartheid in Israel. Millions of rural Somali people are facing unprecedented challenges to their food security, and that's according to the findings of a recently released food security survey. The Food and Agriculture Organization, AFAO, is calling for an urgent scale-up in emergency humanitarian aid alongside transformative actions to improve food and water security and people's resilience against climate change.
Strategic investment and transformative approaches must be made to sustainably improve food and water security for millions of Somali. Investment in strengthening existing early warning system, flexible funding for anticipatory actions, and area-based model approaches that have already existed is necessary. That will help us to break the cycle of year-on-year acute vulnerability, especially in rural communities. The need continues to rise. 6.5 million people are likely to be in acute and severe food insecurity stage, and this 200,000 people will be in famine situation of food insecurity. See, the support is not provided in the next 6 months.
And back here in Nigeria, the driver of a BRT bus has been arrested following the death of at least 6 persons after a moving train rammed into the vehicle conveying Lagos State staff at the PWD bus stop in the Ikeja area of Lagos. Many others were injured in that incident, which occurred this morning. 2 of the victims died at the scene of the accident, while 4 others died at the hospital. Eyewitness accounts told Channels Television that officials of the Nigerian Railway Corporation tried to stop the bus driver from crossing the rail line, but he declined to stop. Many safety agencies, including LASEMA, NEMA, the police, FRSC, Civil Defense, and the Nigeria Railway Corporation team are among the first responders and took part in the rescue exercise. Meanwhile, the Minister of Aviation, Senator Hadi Sirika, has directed the Nigerian Safety Investigation Bureau to commence immediate investigation into the collision between the passenger train and the bus. Describing the accident as unfortunate, the minister assured the public of the capacity of the NSIB to unravel the immediate and remote cause of that accident and proffer ways to prevent such in future.
When the train was coming, I think all signals were given just to indicate that the train was coming. So a lot of cars that were supposed to cross, past this junction, did stop. But I heard that the staff bus that carry people to Palausa, the driver had an earpiece, so maybe he didn't hear, but he decided that he was going to beat the train. But unfortunately, when you don't understand the heaviness of of the vehicle, I think he underestimated probably the speed. But what we know is that he got hit, and then he was dragged about 200 to about 250 meters. And we put the team together. I think the investigation is going on just to get specifics on what actually happened. This is one of the junctions that will be shut down once the federal government begin the construction of their overpass. So I know that contract has been awarded, but pending that time, we have a flagman here. We have the necessary safety measures in place just to make sure that we avoid this kind of accident. But the one that happened was quite unfortunate. We will do further investigation. We understand that we have the driver somewhere in the police station, so we'll be questioning the driver just to try and understand what happened, what actually happened. So, but that's the information that we have right now.
The Hartby Sport Dam in South Africa used to be brimming with people enjoying scientific and scenic landscapes and even recreational water sports. But now visitors are greeted with a sight of boats stuck in the sea of invasive green water hyacinth weed. Scientists have now found a solution, but they say it's just temporary and must be done.
The spike in Harties, as Hartby Spurt is known, can be attributed to pollution with sewage, industrial chemicals, heavy metals and litter flowing on rivers from Johannesburg and Pretoria.
Water hyacinth is the symptom of pollution. So the reason that it invades systems is because there's an increase in nitrates and phosphates, which are essentially fertilizer that allows the plant to grow. So a system like Hartbeespoort Dam is probably one of the most polluted systems in South Africa, potentially Africa, in that the amount of nitrates and phosphates in the water are higher than anywhere else, and they are coming from upstream.
Nutrients and the pollutants act as perfect fertilizers for the weed, a big concern for nearby communities due to its devastating impact on livelihoods. Dion Mostert, 53, is on the verge of laying off workers at his recreational boat company after his business came into a standstill because of carpet of water hyacinths.
In the last month, it has closed the business down. So we've lost all our business bar one boat. As you can see, the boats are standing, they aren't going anywhere, there's no passengers. It's affecting tourism in our town. It's affecting tourist jobs. We are on the verge of letting 25 staff go.
He has considered using herbicides, but admits it would only be a quick fix against the weed. Scientists and community members have, however, found a unique way to deal with the invasion by introducing a water hyacinth-eating bug, Megamelus cutillaris. The tiny phloem-feeding insects are the natural enemy to the plants. Both are originally from the Amazon basin in South America and are released by thousands at a time. The insects destroy the weed by attacking tissue that transports nutrients produced in the leaves during photosynthesis to the rest of the plant. The insect army has previously reduced the expanse of water hyacinths to a mere 5% on the dam. At times, the weed has covered at least 50% of it. Environmentalist Patrick Gander mass rears the bugs at Wetland Conservancy southeast of Harties, once home to more than 100 species of birds, which attracted a lot of tourists. But now, unable to find food such as fish and small plants, with much of the wetlands water covered in plants, there are only 2 or 3 species of birds left. Scientists warn that while the insects have been fairly successful in controlling the situation, more needs to be done to treat its cause, which authorities could tackle by tightening regulation on wastewater management.
This is where we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu.